The stagecoach lurched to a violent stop outside Oatman, Arizona territory, and Abigail Moore tumbled onto the dusty ground with nothing but the worn leather Bible her mother had pressed into her hands 3 weeks earlier, right before the fever took her last breath. Abigail pushed herself to her knees, her dark traveling dress now covered in red desert dust, and clutched the Bible against her chest as the driver tossed her small carpetbag down beside her. The August heat of 1883 beat down mercilessly, and she could already feel sweat gathering at her temples despite the dry air. The other passengers barely glanced her way as the stage continued its journey toward California, leaving her stranded in a town that looked like it had been carved from the rock and baked hard by the sun. She stood slowly, brushing off her skirts as best she could, and surveyed what would apparently be her new home. Oatman sprawled across the hillside like scattered dice, a collection of wooden buildings and tents that serviced the mines dotting the Black Mountains. Men moved about their business, most of them miners judging by their dusty clothes and weathered faces. A few women hurried along the wooden sidewalks, but none paid her any attention. Abigail picked up her carpetbag and started walking toward what looked like the main street, her throat dry and her stomach empty. She had exactly $4.37 to her name, no family and no prospects. The only thing her mother had been able to give her was an address, a name scrawled on a piece of paper tucked inside the Bible. Mrs. Dorothy Henderson, Oatman, Arizona territory. Her mother's cousin, though they had not spoken in 20 years. The first building she passed was a saloon, already full of noise despite the early afternoon hour. Next came a general store, then a boarding house with a faded sign advertising rooms by the week or month. Abigail forced herself to keep walking, asking directions from a woman carrying laundry, until she finally found herself standing before a small white house at the edge of town. She knocked 3 times, waited, then knocked again. Nothing. A neighbor hanging washing on a line next door called out, "If you are looking for Dorothy Henderson, she passed on last winter. Pneumonia took her quick." The words hit Abigail like a physical blow. She stood there on the porch, feeling the last thread of hope snap inside her chest. The neighbor woman was watching her with open curiosity, so Abigail forced herself to nod politely and walk away, though she had no idea where to go. She found herself on the main street again, standing in the shade of an awning, trying to think through the roaring panic in her head. $4 would not last long. She needed work, lodging, food. She opened the Bible, reading the familiar verses her mother had marked, trying to find some comfort in the words, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart and lean not on your own understanding." "You look lost, miss." Abigail looked up sharply to find a tall man standing a respectful distance away, his hat in his hands. He was perhaps 26 or 27, with sun-darkened skin and green eyes that seemed kind despite the hard line of his jaw. His clothes marked him as a working man, a cowboy judging by his boots and the way he stood, but they were clean and well-mended. "I am managing," she said, though her voice came out smaller than she intended. He glanced at the Bible in her hands, then at her dusty dress and the carpetbag at her feet. "Forgive me for being forward, but you have the look of someone who just got bad news." Abigail found herself swallowing against unexpected tears. Something about his direct kindness made it harder to maintain her composure than all the indifference she had faced so far. "I came here to stay with family. I just learned she passed away last winter." The man's expression shifted to genuine sympathy. He put his hat back on and seemed to consider something for a moment. "My name is Ethan Cassidy. I run cattle on a small spread about 5 miles north of here. It is not much, but it is honest work and good land." Abigail Moore, she replied automatically, not sure why he was telling her this. Miss Moore, I realize this is unusual, and I do not want to presume anything improper, but I could use help at the ranch. My housekeeper, Mrs. Patterson, left 2 weeks ago to care for her sick daughter in Prescott. I have been managing on my own, but the house is a disaster and I am no good at cooking anything beyond coffee and beans. If you need work and a place to stay, the job is yours. Mrs. Patterson had her own room off the kitchen, and I give you my word as a Christian man that you would be treated with complete respect. Abigail stared at him, trying to process the offer. It seemed too convenient, too perfectly timed, and every warning her mother had ever given her about trusting strangers echoed in her mind. But as she looked into Ethan Cassidy's weathered face, she saw no deception there. Just a straightforward man making a practical offer. I have no references, she said slowly, and I have only $4 to my name. I cannot pay for lodging while I look for other work. I am not asking for money. I am offering a job, fair wages, room and board. If you can cook, clean, and do not mind the isolation, that is all I need to know. He paused, then added, I understand if you do not feel comfortable accepting. I can point you toward the boarding house, and I believe the hotel restaurant might be hiring waitresses. Abigail looked down at the Bible in her hands again. Faith is enough to start. The thought came to her unbidden in a voice that sounded almost like her mother's. She had come this far on faith and $4. Perhaps this was the answer to the prayer she had been repeating since leaving Missouri. I can cook and clean, she said, meeting his eyes directly, and I work hard. If you are serious about the offer, I accept. Ethan Cassidy's face broke into a relieved smile. I am very serious. Let me get my supplies loaded up and we can head out to the ranch. Should be home before dark. True to his word, Ethan spent the next hour loading sacks of flour, sugar, and other supplies into a sturdy wagon while Abigail sat in the shade and drank water from a canteen he had given her. She watched him work, noting the efficiency of his movements and the way other people in town greeted him with genuine warmth. Several people shot her curious glances, and she knew the town would be buzzing with gossip by nightfall about Ethan Cassidy leaving with a strange young woman. When everything was loaded, Ethan helped her up onto the wagon seat and they started north out of Oatman. The road was rough, more of a trail really, winding through creosote and sagebrush with the mountains rising stark and beautiful on either side. Ethan kept up a steady stream of conversation, pointing out landmarks and telling her about the ranch. I have about 200 head of cattle, he explained as the wagon bounced over a particularly rough patch. It is not a huge operation, but the land is good and there is water year-round from a spring-fed creek. I have 2 ranch hands who come by during the day, Manuel Rodriguez and his son Carlos. Good men, been working with me for 3 years. They head home to their own place each evening, so it is usually just me at the ranch house overnight. How long have you had the ranch? Abigail asked, genuinely curious. 5 years. I saved up working as a cowhand on bigger spreads, then bought this land when it came available. Built most of the house myself, though Manuel and Carlos helped with the barn and corrals. He glanced at her. It is a simple life, Miss Moore, but it is mine. No debts, no boss telling me what to do, just good honest work. There was pride in his voice, and Abigail found herself respecting that. She knew what it meant to work for something, to build a life from almost nothing. Her parents had done the same when they homesteaded in Missouri, though illness and bad luck had eventually worn them down. The ranch came into view as the sun began its descent toward the western mountains. Ethan had not exaggerated when he called it simple. The house was a single-story structure made of wood and adobe, with a covered porch running along the front. A barn and several corrals stood nearby, and Abigail could see cattle grazing in the distance near a line of cottonwood trees that marked the creek. "It is beautiful," she said, and meant it. There was something honest about the place, something solid. Ethan looked pleased. "It is home. Come on, let me show you around." He helped her down from the wagon and carried her carpetbag inside while she followed with her Bible. The main room served as both kitchen and living area, with a large stone fireplace dominating one wall. The furniture was simple but well made, and everything was covered in a fine layer of dust. Dirty dishes were piled in a basin, and she could see signs of bachelor living everywhere she looked. "This would be your room," Ethan said, opening a door off the kitchen. It was small but clean, with a real bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. "Mrs. Patterson kept it nice. I have not touched anything since she left." Abigail set her Bible on the dresser and felt something loosen in her chest. A room of her own, a door that closed, a window with a view. It was more than she had dared hope for when she tumbled off that stagecoach. "It is perfect," she said. Ethan showed her the rest of the house, including his own room at the opposite end, then took her out to see the barn and meet the horses. By the time they finished the tour, the sun was setting and Abigail's stomach was reminding her loudly that she had not eaten since dawn. "I will make us some dinner," she offered, "if you show me where everything is." "You do not have to start tonight," Ethan protested. "You have had a long day." "So have you, and I imagine you are as hungry as I am. Besides, I would like to see what I have to work with." They ended up working together in the kitchen, Ethan showing her where he kept various supplies while she assessed what she had to work with. She found salt pork, potatoes, canned tomatoes, and onions, and set about making a simple but hearty stew. Ethan sat at the table watching her work, occasionally answering her questions about the kitchen setup. "You really can cook," he observed as wonderful smells began filling the house. "My mother taught me. We did not have much, but she made sure I could manage a household properly." Abigail stirred the pot and added a bit more salt. "She wanted to make sure I could take care of myself. She sounds like a good woman." She was. Abigail blinked against the sudden sting of tears. The fever took her so fast. 1 week she was fine, the next she was gone. "My father died 2 years ago and we lost the farm to debts. Coming here to my mother's cousin was supposed to be a new start." "I am sorry for your loss," Ethan said quietly. "Both of them. But for what it is worth, I am glad that stagecoach brought you to Oatman." They ate dinner together as the last light faded from the sky, talking easily about small things. Ethan told her more about the ranch, about the challenges of raising cattle in the desert, about his hopes to expand the operation over time. Abigail found herself relaxing in his company, something she had not expected. He was easy to talk to, straightforward and honest, with none of the swagger or false charm she had seen in some men. After dinner, she insisted on washing the dishes while Ethan saw to the animals one last time. By the time he came back inside, she had the kitchen clean and was heating water for coffee. "You have already made this place feel different," he said, looking around at the tidy kitchen. "More like a home." "Give me a few days and I will have the whole house properly sorted," Abigail promised. "Tomorrow, I will start on a real cleaning, and I will need to know what supplies you want me to keep on hand for cooking." They sat on the porch in the cool evening air, drinking coffee and watching the stars emerge one by one in the vast desert sky. The silence was comfortable rather than awkward, and Abigail felt some of the tension she had been carrying since her mother's death finally begin to ease. "Miss Moore," Ethan said eventually, "I want you to know that you are safe here. I meant what I said about treating you with respect." "You have my word on that." "I believe you, Mr. Cassidy, and I appreciate your kindness more than I can say. You took a chance on a stranger today." "Sometimes faith is enough to start," he said simply. "You had that Bible in your hands when I first saw you, and you looked like someone who needed help. Seemed like the Christian thing to do." Abigail looked at him in the starlight, this cowboy who had offered her salvation without asking for anything in return, and felt something shift in her heart. It was too soon to call it anything more than gratitude, but there was a warmth there, a connection she had not expected to feel. The next few days fell into a comfortable rhythm. Abigail rose before dawn to start breakfast, feeding Ethan and the ranch hands before they headed out to work with the cattle. She spent her days cleaning the house from top to bottom, washing every window and surface until the place gleamed. She organized the kitchen properly, took inventory of supplies, and started planning more varied meals than the simple fare Ethan had been surviving on. Manuel and Carlos treated her with friendly respect, clearly approving of the changes she was making. They were father and son, with Manuel in his 50s and Carlos about 22, both of them skilled cattlemen who clearly respected Ethan. Through them, she learned more about her employer. "Mr. Ethan, he is a good man," Manuel told her one afternoon when she brought lunch out to where they were mending fence. "Fair, honest, works as hard as any of us. Some ranch owners, they think they are too good to get their hands dirty. Not him." She saw the truth of that every day. Ethan worked from dawn until dusk, riding out with the men to check on the cattle, mending fence, breaking horses, doing whatever needed doing. He came home each evening dusty and exhausted, but he always took time to talk with her about the day, asking about her work and sharing stories about his. They fell into the habit of sitting on the porch after dinner, talking as the desert cooled around them. Ethan told her about growing up in Texas, about working his way west as a young man, about his dreams for the ranch. Abigail shared her own stories about life in Missouri, about her parents and the struggles they faced, about the faith that had sustained her mother through everything. "You miss her a lot," Ethan observed one evening about a week after she arrived. "Every day, but being here helps. Having work to do, feeling useful again. You gave me a purpose when I had lost everything else. I think it worked both ways. This place needed you, whether I realized it or not." The house was transformed under Abigail's care. She made curtains from fabric. Ethan bought on his next trip to town, planted herbs in a small kitchen garden, and generally turned the bachelor cabin into something that felt warm and welcoming. She also proved herself to be an excellent cook, producing meals that had Ethan and the ranch hands praising her skills enthusiastically. "If you keep feeding me like this, I am going to get fat," Ethan joked one evening over a dinner of roasted chicken and vegetables. "You work hard enough that I do not think that is a risk," Abigail replied, serving him another helping. "Besides, a man needs proper nutrition." She had been at the ranch for 2 weeks when a problem arose with some of the cattle. Ethan came in at midday looking worried and explained that several head had wandered off toward rougher country to the north. "Manuel and I need to go track them down. Could take a few days. I hate to leave you here alone, but Carlos will check on you daily." "I will be fine," Abigail assured him. "I grew up on a farm, remember? I know how to handle myself. There is a rifle above the door and a shotgun in my room. Do you know how to shoot? My father taught me. I am not an expert, but I can hit what I aim at." Ethan looked relieved. "Keep the doors locked at night. If anyone comes around that makes you uncomfortable, do not hesitate to use the gun. Better safe than sorry." "I will be careful. You focus on finding those cattle." He left at dawn the next morning with Manuel, and Abigail found herself alone at the ranch for the first time. Carlos came by mid-morning to check on her and help with some of the heavier chores, but then he left too, and she had the rest of the day to herself. She threw herself into work, using the time to do some of the bigger projects she had been putting off. She reorganized the pantry completely, cleaned out the root cellar, and started work on a new quilt using some fabric scraps she had found. The work kept her busy, but she found herself listening for the sound of Ethan's return, surprised by how much she missed his presence. The second day passed much the same way. Carlos checked in, helped her move some furniture, and then left her to her projects. That evening, as she sat on the porch watching the sunset alone, Abigail realized how much she had come to enjoy her evening conversations with Ethan. The ranch felt empty without him. He returned on the third day, riding in around noon with Manuel, both of them dusty and tired but successful. They had found the cattle and driven them back to safer pasture. "Everything all right here?" Ethan asked, dismounting stiffly. "Perfectly fine." "Nothing exciting to report. Are you hungry? Starving?" "We have been eating trail rations for 2 days." Abigail had stew ready, having anticipated their return, and both men ate like they had been starved. After Manuel left to head home, Ethan helped her clean up the kitchen, something he had started doing regularly. "I miss this," he said, drying dishes while she washed. "Missed having someone to talk to at the end of the day." "I missed it too," Abigail admitted. "The house felt too quiet without you here." Their eyes met, and something passed between them, an acknowledgement of feelings that had been growing steadily over the past few weeks. Ethan looked like he wanted to say something more, but instead he just smiled and went back to drying dishes. That night on the porch, their conversation turned more personal. Ethan told her about a woman he had courted once in Texas, a rancher's daughter who ultimately chose a wealthier man. "It hurt at the time," he admitted, "but looking back, I think we would have made each other miserable. She wanted things I could not give her, a big house in town, fancy parties, that kind of life. I just wanted land and cattle and simple living." "Some women want more than that," Abigail said carefully, "but some of us understand that the simple life can be the richest one." "Is that what you want?" "A simple life. I want a home," she said honestly. "A place where I belong, work that matters, people I care about. Everything else is just decoration." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. "You have a home here, Abigail, for as long as you want it." It was the first time he had used her given name, and she felt warmth spread through her chest at the sound of it. "Thank you, Ethan. That means more than you know." The weeks turned into a month, then 2. Summer gave way to fall, and the desert heat mellowed into more comfortable temperatures. Abigail had long since stopped thinking of herself as just an employee. The ranch felt like home, and Ethan felt like much more than an employer. They had not spoken about their growing feelings directly, but they were evident in 1,000 small ways. The way Ethan always brought her little gifts from town, a new book or a packet of seeds for her garden. The way Abigail made sure his favorite meals appeared with increasing frequency. The way they found excuses to spend time together beyond just their evening talks. Manuel noticed, of course. One afternoon, when Abigail brought lunch out to the men, the older man pulled her aside. "Miss Abigail, forgive an old man for speaking plainly, but Mr. Ethan, he cares for you very much. I see the way he looks at you." Abigail felt her cheeks heat. "I care for him too." "Then why do you both dance around it? Life is short. Happiness should not be delayed." "It is complicated. I work for him. I do not want him to feel obligated or for people to think poorly of either of us." Manuel shook his head. "You think too much. The heart knows what it wants. The rest is just details." That evening, Ethan came in from work looking more thoughtful than usual. He was quiet through dinner, and even their porch conversation felt stilted. Finally, he turned to face her directly. "Abigail, I need to say something, and I am probably going to make a mess of it, but I cannot keep it to myself any longer." Her heart began beating faster. "All right. When you arrived in Oatman with nothing but that Bible, I told you that faith was enough to start. I believed that then, and I believe it now. But something has happened that I did not expect. I have fallen in love with you." Abigail's breath caught. She had known, of course, had seen it in his eyes and felt it in her own heart, but hearing him say the words made everything suddenly real. Ethan continued, words tumbling out now. "I know this complicates things. You work for me, and I do not want you to feel pressured in any way. If you do not feel the same, we can just forget I said anything and go back to how things were. But I had to tell you, because living under the same roof with you every day and not being able to tell you how I feel has been slowly driving me crazy." "Ethan," Abigail said softly, reaching out to take his hand. "I love you too. I have for weeks now. I was just afraid to say anything." His face transformed with joy and relief. "Really? You are not just saying that, really. You gave me a home when I had nothing. You treated me with respect and kindness. You made me laugh again when I thought I would never feel joy after losing my mother. How could I not fall in love with you?" Ethan stood up, pulling her to her feet, and for a moment they just looked at each other in the starlight. Then he cupped her face gently in his calloused hands and kissed her, soft and sweet and full of promise. When they finally pulled apart, both of them were smiling. "I want to do this properly," Ethan said. "Will you marry me, Abigail Moore? Will you be my wife, my partner in this life we are building?" "Yes," she said without hesitation. "Yes, absolutely yes." They were married 4 weeks later in Oatman's small church, with Manuel and his family as witnesses. Abigail wore a simple blue dress that Ethan had bought her and carried a bouquet of desert wildflowers. The ceremony was brief but heartfelt, and when the preacher pronounced them man and wife, Ethan kissed her in front of the whole small congregation without a hint of embarrassment. The ranch became truly theirs after that, not just his place where she worked, but their home that they built together. Abigail moved her belongings into Ethan's room, now their room, and they settled into married life with the same easy compatibility they had always shared. The physical intimacy of marriage was new to both of them, and they approached it with a mixture of nervousness and excitement. Their wedding night was tender and sweet, full of whispered endearments and gentle discoveries. They learned each other slowly, building passion on the foundation of genuine love and respect. "I never knew I could be this happy," Ethan told her one morning a few weeks after the wedding, both of them still tangled in the bedsheets as dawn light filtered through the curtains. "Neither did I. When I got off that stagecoach, I thought my life was over, but it was really just beginning." Life on the ranch continued with its daily rhythms, but everything felt different now. They worked together as true partners, making decisions jointly about the ranch's future. Abigail proved to have a good head for business, helping Ethan negotiate better prices for his cattle and managing the ranch finances more efficiently. Winter came to the Arizona territory, mild by Missouri standards but still requiring preparation. They worked together to store food, repair buildings, and make sure the cattle had adequate shelter and feed. On cold evenings, they sat close together by the fire, reading or talking or simply enjoying each other's company. It was during one of these evenings in late January that Abigail realized she was pregnant. She had suspected for a couple of weeks, but wanted to be certain before saying anything. When she finally told Ethan, he reacted with pure joy, picking her up and spinning her around before setting her down carefully as if she might break. "A baby," he kept saying. "We are going to have a baby. In late summer, I think. August or September. What do you need? Should we get a doctor? Do you need to rest more? Maybe you should not be doing so much work." Abigail laughed at his sudden protectiveness. "Women have been having babies forever, Ethan. I am healthy and strong. I will be fine. But yes, we should probably arrange for a midwife when the time comes." She continued working through the spring and early summer, only slowing down when the Arizona heat and her expanding belly made heavy work impossible. Ethan became almost comically overprotective, constantly asking if she needed to rest or offering to do tasks she was perfectly capable of handling. "You are going to drive me crazy," she told him one afternoon when he tried to stop her from hanging laundry. "I am pregnant, not incapacitated. I just worry. You and this baby are the most important things in my life." She softened at the genuine concern in his voice. "I know. And I love you for it. But you need to trust that I know my limits." Their son was born on a sweltering August evening in 1884, almost exactly a year after Abigail had first arrived in Oatman. The midwife they had hired stayed at the ranch for the last 2 weeks of Abigail's pregnancy, and she proved invaluable during the long labor. Ethan paced outside for hours, occasionally being allowed in to hold Abigail's hand between contractions. When he finally heard the baby's first cry, he burst into the room despite the midwife's protests. "A boy," the midwife announced, cleaning the baby and wrapping him in a soft blanket. Healthy and strong lunged. Abigail was exhausted but glowing as Ethan sat beside her, and they looked at their son together for the first time. He had Ethan's coloring but Abigail's delicate features, a perfect blend of both of them. "What should we name him?" Ethan asked, gently touching the baby's tiny hand. "I was thinking Samuel," Abigail said. "After my father, Samuel Cassidy. I like it. Welcome to the world, Sam." The baby's early months were exhausting but wonderful. Abigail navigated motherhood with the same practical competence she brought to everything else, while Ethan proved to be a devoted father. He would come in from working with the cattle and immediately reach for his son, talking to the baby about ranch life and making elaborate plans for teaching him to ride and rope. "He is only 3 months old," Abigail would remind him, laughing. "Give him time to walk before you put him on a horse." Manuel and Carlos were equally smitten with the baby, and Manuel's wife Rosa became a regular visitor, offering advice and help that Abigail gratefully accepted. As Samuel grew, so did the ranch. With Abigail's help managing the business side and Ethan's skill with the cattle, they were able to expand their herd and buy additional land. They hired another ranch hand, a young man named Tom who proved reliable and hardworking. Life fell into a pattern that was both challenging and deeply satisfying. They worked hard, loved deeply, and built something lasting together. Samuel took his first steps on the ranch porch, spoke his first words while watching his father work with the horses, and grew into a sturdy, happy child. When Samuel was 2 years old, Abigail discovered she was pregnant again. This time the pregnancy was easier, perhaps because she knew what to expect, and she delivered a healthy daughter in the spring of 1887. They named her Catherine, after Ethan's mother. "2 children," Ethan said wonderingly, holding his daughter while Samuel climbed onto the bed to see his new sister. "Our family is growing. We are blessed," Abigail agreed, watching her husband and children with a full heart. The years continued to pass, marked by the cycles of ranch life and the growth of their family. Samuel grew into a serious, responsible boy who loved working alongside his father. Catherine proved to be more adventurous, always getting into mischief and pushing boundaries. They welcomed a third child, another son they named Daniel, when Samuel was 5 and Catherine 3. Through it all, Abigail and Ethan's love only deepened. They weathered the inevitable challenges that came with ranch life. Droughts that required them to move cattle to different pastures, harsh winters that tested their preparations, market fluctuations that affected cattle prices. But they faced everything together, partners in every sense of the word. One evening when Daniel was about 6 months old, Abigail and Ethan found themselves alone on the porch again, just like they used to be before the children came along. Rosa had offered to watch the children for the evening, insisting that the couple needed time to themselves. "Remember when we used to do this every night?" Ethan asked, putting his arm around Abigail's shoulders. "Just sit and talk until the stars came out. We still do this, just with more interruptions now." Abigail leaned into him, enjoying the rare quiet. "Do you ever regret it? Taking in that desperate woman with just a Bible to her name?" "Not for a single second. That was the best decision I ever made. You transformed this place, Abigail. Transformed my life. Before you came, I was just existing, working and sleeping and working some more. You gave me a real home, a family, a reason for all of it. You saved my life, Ethan. I had nothing, no hope, no future. And then this cowboy appeared and told me faith was enough to start. You were right. That faith brought me here to you, to this life we have built." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the sun paint the mountains in shades of gold and red. "The children are getting big," Ethan observed. "Samuel will be ready to take on real ranch work in a few years, and Catherine is going to be a handful when she gets older." "She has your stubborn streak. She has yours," Abigail countered, laughing. "That determination to do everything her own way. God help us when Daniel starts walking. 3 of them running around is going to be chaos. Good chaos, though. Happy chaos." More years passed, each one adding to the tapestry of their life together. The ranch prospered under their joint management, becoming one of the more successful operations in the area. They added a room onto the house to accommodate their growing children, built a new barn, and improved the water systems. Samuel turned into a skilled cattleman, working alongside his father and eventually taking over more and more of the daily operations. Catherine proved to have her mother's head for numbers and started helping with the ranch accounts when she was barely 10 years old. Daniel showed an affinity for horses, training them with remarkable patience and skill. Abigail and Ethan watched their children grow with pride and occasional bittersweet awareness that time was passing quickly. Samuel started courting a local girl when he was 19, a sweet young woman named Emma who fit perfectly into their family. Catherine declared she was never getting married because she wanted to focus on expanding the ranch's business operations, a pronouncement that made both her parents hide smiles. "She will change her mind when she meets the right person," Ethan predicted. "Or she will not, and that is fine too," Abigail replied. "We raised her to be independent and make her own choices." On their 15th wedding anniversary, Ethan surprised Abigail with a trip to Prescott, arranging for the children to stay with Manuel's family for a week. It was the first time they had been away from the ranch and children for more than a day since getting married. "I cannot believe you arranged all this without me knowing," Abigail said as they checked into a hotel that was far fancier than anything either of them was accustomed to. "I had help. Catherine handled all the correspondence, believe it or not. She is remarkably efficient when she wants to be." They spent the week like newlyweds, enjoying the luxury of uninterrupted time together. They ate in restaurants, attended a theater performance, and spent long hours in bed making love without worrying about being interrupted by children. But they also found themselves talking about the ranch and the kids constantly, realizing how thoroughly their family had become the center of their world. "I miss them," Abigail admitted on their last evening away. "Is that ridiculous? We have barely been gone a week." "I miss them too. But this was good. We needed this time to remember who we are beyond just parents and ranchers. We are the couple who met when I had nothing but a Bible and faith, Abigail said softly. The cowboy who believed that was enough to start with. And look what we built from that start. A whole life, a family, a legacy. They returned home to chaos, with all three children talking over each other to tell their parents about everything that had happened while they were gone. The house felt warm and full and wonderfully alive, and both Abigail and Ethan realized there was nowhere else they would rather be. Samuel married Emma 2 years later in a beautiful ceremony at the ranch, with the entire community attending. Ethan and Abigail stood together watching their son exchange vows, both of them thinking about their own wedding day and how far they had come since then. "He looks happy," Abigail whispered to Ethan. "He is. She is good for him. Reminds me of someone else I know who came into a cowboy's life and made everything better." Samuel and Emma built a small house on the far edge of the ranch property, close enough to help with operations but far enough to have their own space. When Emma announced she was pregnant a year later, Abigail cried with joy at the prospect of becoming a grandmother. Their first grandchild, a boy named James, arrived in the spring of 1902. Abigail, now in her late 30s and still running the ranch household with the same efficiency she always had, took to grandmotherhood with enthusiasm. Ethan proved to be an even more indulgent grandfather than he had been a father, constantly sneaking treats to the baby and offering to watch him whenever Samuel and Emma needed a break. Catherine surprised everyone by falling in love with a banker from Kingman who came to the area on business. She fought the attraction at first, determined to stick to her declaration about focusing on business rather than marriage, but eventually admitted defeat. "He understands about the ranch," she told her parents when announcing her engagement. "He knows I will always be involved in operations here. And he is teaching me about investments and diversification that could really help us grow. We just want you to be happy, sweetheart," Abigail assured her. "Whatever choices you make, we support you." Catherine married her banker in 1904, and while she did move to Kingman with her husband, she remained deeply involved in ranch business. She convinced her parents to invest in better breeding stock and helped them establish contracts with larger cattle buyers, significantly increasing their profits. Daniel, their youngest, stayed at the ranch and eventually took over the horse training and breeding operation. He proved to have a remarkable gift for it, producing horses that were sought after throughout the territory. Arizona achieved statehood in 1912, and the Cassidy Ranch was well positioned to take advantage of the growing economy. What had started as a small 200-head operation had grown into a significant enterprise, with multiple buildings, hired hands, and operations spanning several thousand acres. Through it all, Abigail and Ethan remained partners in everything. They were in their 50s now, still active in ranch operations, though they had turned over much of the daily work to their children. They had earned the right to slow down a bit, to spend more time with their grandchildren, to enjoy the life they had built. One evening, nearly 30 years after Abigail first arrived in Oatman, they found themselves on the porch again. The house behind them was quiet, with just the two of them in residence now that all the children had their own homes. It felt strange sometimes, being back to just the two of them, but it also felt right somehow, coming full circle to where they had started. "Remember the first night we sat here?" Ethan asked, taking her hand. "You were so tired, so overwhelmed, but trying so hard to be strong." "I remember. I thought you were crazy for hiring me on the spot, but I was too desperate to question it. Best decision I never questioned. I knew that night that you were special, Took me a bit longer to realize I was falling in love with you, but looking back, I think it started that first day." Abigail leaned her head on his shoulder. "When I got off that stagecoach with nothing but my mother's Bible, I thought my life was over. I had no idea it was really just beginning. Everything good in my life came from that moment when a kind cowboy told me faith was enough to start. It was enough for both of us. Faith, hope, and hard work. That is all we had, and it was enough to build all of this." Ethan gestured toward the ranch spread out before them, lit by the last rays of sunset. They had 5 grandchildren now, with more on the way. The ranch prospered under the family's management, and all 3 of their children were happy and successful. They had weathered droughts and depressions, illness and injury, all the challenges that came with ranching life. And through it all, their love had only grown stronger. "No regrets?" Abigail asked. "Not a single one. You? Only that I cannot go back and tell that scared young woman on the stagecoach how everything was going to turn out. She would not have believed me." They sat together as the stars emerged, just like they had done countless times over the past 30 years. The ranch was quiet around them, the cattle settled for the night, the horses peaceful in their corrals. It was a good life, built on faith and love and hard work, everything they had hoped for and more than they could have imagined. Their later years were spent surrounded by family and the satisfaction of a life well lived. They traveled occasionally, visiting Catherine in Kingman and taking trips to see parts of the country they had never explored. But they always came home to the ranch, to the land they loved and the life they had built together. Ethan lived to be 74, passing peacefully in his sleep one night with Abigail beside him. She mourned him deeply, but found comfort in their children, grandchildren, and the great-grandchildren who had started arriving. The ranch continued to operate under family management, with Samuel running day-to-day operations and his siblings contributing their various skills. Abigail lived another 8 years after Ethan's death, surrounded by family and active in ranch business until the very end. She kept the worn Bible that had been in her hands the day she arrived in Oatman, and she often read from it to her grandchildren and great-grandchildren, telling them the story of how faith had brought her to Arizona territory and to the love of her life. On quiet evenings, her children would find her sitting on the porch alone, and they knew she was remembering all those conversations with Ethan, all those years of partnership and love. She never remarried, telling anyone who asked that she had already had the love of a lifetime. When Abigail passed away peacefully at 82, surrounded by 3 generations of family, she was buried next to Ethan on a hillside overlooking the ranch. The funeral drew people from across the state, testament to the impact the Cassidy family had made on their community. Samuel stood at his mother's graveside. His own grandchildren gathered around him and told them the story his mother had told him many times. "Your great-grandmother arrived here with nothing but a worn Bible and faith. Your great-grandfather told her that faith was enough to start. From that beginning they built all of this." He gestured toward the sprawling ranch below. "They built a family, a business, a legacy. They showed us that with faith, love, and hard work, anything is possible." The Cassidy Ranch continued to operate for generations, always staying in family hands. The story of Abigail and Ethan became family legend, told and retold to each new generation. The worn Bible was preserved and passed down, a reminder of where they all came from and the faith that had started everything. The porch where they had spent so many evenings remained a gathering place for the family. On clear nights, family members would sit there and look up at the stars, feeling connected to those who had come before. And if they were very quiet and listened carefully, they could almost hear the echo of long-ago conversations. The gentle murmur of two people who had found each other against all odds and built something lasting together. Years turned into decades, and the Wild West became history. But the story of the woman with nothing but faith and the cowboy who believed that was enough to start remained. It was a story of hope and love, of second chances and new beginnings, of two people who found each other in the desert and created something beautiful together. The ranch house was eventually expanded and modernized, but the original rooms were preserved, including the small bedroom off the kitchen where Abigail had first stayed. The fireplace Ethan had built still stood strong, and the porch where they had courted remained a favorite family gathering spot. The cottonwoods along the creek grew tall and thick, providing shade for cattle and grandchildren alike. Every family reunion included a visit to the hillside graves, where flowers were placed and stories were shared. The youngest children would hear for the first time about their ancestor who arrived on a stage coach with nothing, and the young cowboy who gave her a chance. They would learn about faith and hard work, about building something from nothing, about love that lasted a lifetime and beyond. The worn Bible that Abigail had carried sat in a place of honor in the ranch house, its pages yellowed with age but still readable. The verses her mother had marked were still there, testament to the faith that had sustained her through impossible times. Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. It had been true then, and it remained true through all the generations that followed. The cattle brand that Ethan had designed, a simple C inside a larger C representing the Cassidy name, became known throughout Arizona and beyond. Cassidy beef was respected for its quality, Cassidy horses prized for their training, and the Cassidy name synonymous with integrity and hard work. But more than business success or material wealth, Abigail and Ethan's true legacy was the family they created and the example they set. They showed their children and grandchildren what real partnership looked like, what it meant to build a life together based on mutual respect and genuine love. They demonstrated that circumstances at the beginning did not determine the outcome, that faith and determination could overcome any obstacle. The small church in Oatman where they had married eventually became a historical landmark, and among the old records preserved there was the marriage certificate for Ethan Cassidy and Abigail Moore, dated October 1883. Tour guides would sometimes tell the story of the couple who had helped settle the area, the woman who arrived with nothing and the cowboy who believed faith was enough. As the 21st century arrived, the Cassidy Ranch adapted with the times while staying true to its roots. The family still gathered for holidays and celebrations, still told the old stories, still maintained the traditions that Abigail and Ethan had started. The ranch had survived economic depressions, world wars, droughts, and all the changes that came with modern times. And through it all, the story remained the same. A desperate woman arriving with nothing but a worn Bible, a kind cowboy offering help without expecting anything in return, faith that proved to be enough to start something beautiful, love that grew from simple beginnings into something lasting and profound. Two people who found each other in the vast Arizona desert and created a legacy that would endure for generations. It was a love story, pure and simple. The kind of story that reminded people why they believed in romance, in second chances, in the power of faith and the possibility of finding love in unexpected places. It was the story of Abigail and Ethan, forever preserved in family memory, in the land they had tended, in the lives they had touched. And on quiet evenings, when the Arizona sun painted the mountains gold and the stars began to emerge one by one, you could almost see them still, sitting on that porch, hands intertwined, talking about their day and planning their future. Two souls who had found each other and held on through everything life brought their way. Their love story had ended in the earthly sense, but it lived on in every sunset over the ranch, in every new generation born to carry on their name, in every person who heard their story and dared to believe that faith really was enough to start something beautiful. The cowboy and the woman with the worn Bible had built something that transcended time, a love that would be remembered and celebrated for as long as the ranch stood and stories were told. And that, in the end, was the greatest legacy of all.